first panel with the sci-fi driving science panel. So a look into the universe will be over in the Marston Theater, and the sci-fi driving science panel will be in here. I know we had a little bit of a hiccup with the program book, so the website is the final word on where things will be, spacevision.seds.org/agenda. And now we'll turn it over to the panel. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. This is the NewSpace Grand Vision with Mr. James Pura. Mr. James Pura is president and director of the Space Frontier Foundation. At 29, he has years of experience in the aerospace industry, including NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory, Boeing, and Space Exploration Technologies. Within the foundation, Pura has been chair of the NewSpace Conference, Advocates coordinator, and is now president and director. He has a degree in mechanical engineering from University of California, San Diego, and while in college, started a SEDS chapter which continues today. He also currently operates a real estate investment company in Southern California. Mr. James Pura.
Thanks, Brandon. Can you guys hear me all right? All right, cool. So I'm here to talk to you about what Space Frontier Foundation is, how you can get involved, and contrary to popular belief, we do more than just throw kick-ass parties. So let's talk about me, which I really like to do. My background comes from UC San Diego. I got my degree there, mechanical engineering. When I was going to college, I thought that a job at NASA or Boeing or Lockheed Martin was like the creme de la creme. I was going to work there for 25 years, 50 years maybe, retire, and live my life that way. And then I found out about this thing called commercial space. Spaceship One went up, which turned into Virgin Galactic, and Spaceship Two, and my whole world kind of turned on end. And I found this organization and never looked back. But while I was going to school, I did 2 big internships. I did one for SpaceX, and thankfully I was there for launch number 3, which failed, and launch number 4, which succeeded, all in about 3.5 months. It was pretty cool. I got to see to go from all the way down at the bottom to the pinnacle of success. And I've never seen so many grown men cry in the same room as when flight number 4 succeeded and Falcon 1 actually flew. It was good times. Then I did an internship for Boeing Satellite Systems in El Segundo, and I actually did that. I turned it into I did not just an internship, but I did a co-op. I actually took a couple of quarters off of college, and I did a 6-month co-op, and I worked on satellite dynamics. I worked on about 16 or 17 different subsystems with geosynchronous satellites, and that was pretty cool. If you've ever seen a geosynchronous satellite in person, it's about 3 stories tall, and the solar panels deployed probably take up from wall to wall. It's pretty cool. I got to work on the DirecTV satellites back when they were just starting high-definition TV. It was really cool. So those were my 2 internships, and then I graduated college, and I didn't want to go to work for either one of those, and so I decided to go work at JPL because I didn't want to leave Southern California. And so I stayed there. I worked. I was thankful enough to be put on Mars Science Laboratory, and I worked on the hazardous avoidance cameras there on MSL. And kind of a fun story. When I was working on the hazardous avoidance cameras, I didn't know. I asked the project manager at the time. I said, "Are we ever going to see any pictures out of this thing?" And they said, "Probably not. They're black and white. They're really grainy, low resolution. We'll probably never see a picture taken outside of these cameras." And so I was like, "Oh, all right. Well, at least I can say that I have my fingerprint on the rover." And then about a year later, when it actually landed on Mars, sure enough, the very first 2 pictures coming back from the surface of Mars were on the hazardous avoidance cameras, and that was pretty cool. I was floating that day. It was pretty cool. But then, sure enough, as all big government projects come to an end, there was a massive layoff and me and about 1,000 other engineers got laid off. And I was like, all right, well, you know, I love aerospace, and I just did the space part of aerospace. Let's go do some aero part of aerospace. And so I went up to Seattle, and I started working on airplanes. I got to work on the 777. I am a stress analyst, which means designers design, and then analysts analyze the design and make sure that it's good, it's made out of the right material, it's the load path through metals and structure and fastener, whole bunch of math, and that's what I do. And so I did that for a couple of years, and I'm really proud of the 777 airplane. And now I work for a company called Altair Engineering, and I work on finite element models. And they do hypermesh and OptiStruct. I'm not sure if anybody's heard of that, but it's a competitor to FEMAP and Patran and all these other finite element models software. And I have volunteered for Space Frontier Foundation for over 5 years now, coming on 6 years. I started just like you, going to conferences. I met these. I went to a foundation party and started meeting Darrell Kane from SEDS, and he convinced me to start a SEDS chapter at UC San Diego. And then from working at SEDS, and then I started volunteering for Space Frontier Foundation, and I was a conference volunteer, and then conference volunteer turned into advocates coordinator. Then I became part of the board of directors, and just recently they named me as president. So now I'm in charge of it. So it's I don't know who would in their right mind put me in charge of a nonprofit. It's a dangerous situation, but I must have convinced the right people. So enough about me. Let's talk about the Space Frontier Foundation. What is it? What do they believe in? What do they do? And how can you get involved? Why would you want to get involved? Space Frontier Foundation focuses, the elevator speech basically is that we believe in sustainable settlement. We believe settlement of space is not only possible, it is necessary for the human race to succeed. You know, a lot of people watch movies like Star Trek and they think, oh, okay, well, yeah, obviously that's our future. You know, eventually humanity will expand into space. But then look at where we're at now. How do we get from point A to point B? And that's where we step in and we define what the incremental steps are. What needs to happen, when it needs to happen, what needs to change in Washington, D.C. and elsewhere. And we try to paint the landscape and convince people that it is indeed possible, and not only is it possible, it's necessary for us to succeed. So our goals, this is our credo, what you're looking at now. We include protecting the Earth's fragile biosphere, creating a freer and more prosperous life for each generation. That's a really important piece because when you think about Star Trek, you notice that it's all military. A civilian in that fictional future can't just buy a ticket, go up into space, maybe go to work, commute back down to Earth. And that's the future that we're actually pushing, is the fact that life in space should be anything just like here on Earth. You should be able to go to Starbucks, pick up a cup of coffee. You should have gravity. You shouldn't have to wear a spacesuit all the time. You should be able to go to a hotel, do a vacation. You know, how cool would it be? It'd be like go to a resort on the moon for a couple of weekends and actually be able to afford it. See, that's the future that we're going for. We want a free and open space frontier, and that's the most important piece. So, Space Frontier Foundation has been around for 25 years, believe it or not. Started in 1988, and this is a list of past projects that the foundation has had. In '89, Jerry O'Neill wrote the book called The High Frontier and started Space Studies Institute, which is a sister organization to Space Frontier Foundation. They focus on the technology necessary in order to develop space settlement. And we come in and we just talk about it, basically. Well, we do a little bit more than that. We also do things like Space Investment Summit. I don't know if anybody of you, have heard about that, but there was this notion that if we're going to start an industry, people need to make money in space. And NASA didn't really like that for the longest time. They were like, no, NASA is space is a place that the government goes, and we develop technologies, and We are the definers. We define what needs to happen and when it needs to happen. And we were like, well, maybe not so much. We need to do things like space solar power. We need to do things like, for instance, we had a project called external tanks. Why is it that the space shuttle had over 100 flights and would take basically an empty external tank almost like 97% of the way to orbit, and then turn around, throw it away? It would go to the bottom of the ocean, and then they'd build a brand new one every single flight. Why not take that extra mass, take it up? It's basically a giant pressure vessel. Why not take them up into orbit, connect them all up, and create a space station out of them? Kind of a novel idea. And so we took that, and 3 or 4 companies came out of that. Sure enough, it never happened because it was an idea that was probably before its time. The legal regime in Washington, D.C. was not what it is now. They're not as open to commercial. They weren't as open to commercial space as they are now, believe it or not. So we also had this project, which I'm really proud of, called Permission to Dream. Mainly not only because of what it did, but also who did it. The CEO of Virgin Galactic was a project manager of Space Frontier Foundation, and he had this idea. He said, why don't we go to telescope manufacturers, convince them to donate a certain number of telescopes every year, and then we can donate them to third world countries and get these kids to look up into space and decide to be engineers. And it worked. And we did that for about 10 years, and it was highly successful. And we have a couple of classrooms that to this day still follow the curriculum that we gave them years back. So that was pretty cool. But what do we do today? Let's talk about who we are and what we do. Oops. Can we get audio? Does it work? Somebody turn it on. Okay. It's not working for me.
It's not.
Uh-huh.
There's 2 displays.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Can you drag it?
Yeah, sure. There we go. Where did that guy go with the tricked out screen and the? Let's see if this works here. Come on. Nope. No, that's not good. Okay. Cool. We got video, we just don't have any audio. Plug this back in here. Nope. All right, well, while we're trying to fix that, the lead up is that, let's just skip that one for now. It's a really cool video. We had Gene Roddenberry's son, Rod Roddenberry, do it for us and come up with a really cool thing. I can actually talk through it. Why don't I do that? It's kind of boring, but there he is. There's Mr. Rod Roddenberry. He actually does scuba diving is his passion, and he actually takes a group of people probably once a month, and actually has a whole line of scuba suits. Oh, there we go.
I really think humanity in the future will be around the solar system. We will be living in multiple communities on multiple surfaces in free space. You can see a future where entrepreneurial companies are going out and doing things that nobody's ever done before. So I worry about the survival of mankind. So I think these guys are playing a vector forward. I don't want to live in the last days of a declining once great society. I want to live in the first days of the next great human adventure. It's not a world of finite shrinking resources and finite shrinking horizons. It frees NASA up to do things that are too risky for the commercial sector to do, and the commercial sector can actually support that, and everybody can work together and do things together that they can't do by themselves. We believe in the possibility that we can go out and do something new. There is more out there if we just put the hard work in to get it. That's what the frontier is about, and space is a frontier that can occupy humanity for thousands of years to come.
So there you go. I don't know how he did this, but I'm just going to do this. You see, I'm not as technologically savvy as some other people are. So the foundation today, we have 5 core projects. We have Teachers in Space. We have NewSpace Conference, which happens every year. We've got the business plan competition as well as the student business plan competition, 2 separate events, but the same project. We have the policy, strategy, and action wing of the foundation. We've also got a newsletter, monthly newsletter called NewSpace News. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about each one of these because it's important to know the connection between each one of them. So in '88, Challenger went down. Not '88, I'm sorry, '86. Challenger went down and there was a teacher on board. And NASA was like, all right, well, we were gonna fly, the idea was to fly teachers into space, bring them back down into the classroom, and they would inspire their kids to follow STEM education. Well, when that went down, so did the project. And a couple years later, Space Frontier Foundation went to NASA headquarters and said, look, clearly you guys can't do this anymore. We totally understand. But we want to take the name and the branding and the logo, and we want to do it in private sector. We want to fly teachers in space on commercial rockets instead of the shuttle and do the same thing. We want to bring them back into the classroom. We want to inspire their students to follow STEM education. And they said yes. They said, absolutely, please. And so that's what we're working on now. We actually host a number of workshops for teachers. We have 2 themes for the workshops right now. We have space medicine and human factors, which the teachers can experience what it's like to train for space. And we've also got the flight experiments, where students, the classrooms, the teachers learn how to design experiments and then go back to their classrooms, and the students design experiments that then go into space and fly on the International Space Station, weather balloons, all that kind of fun stuff. The conference focuses on commercialization of space. It used to be the only one, and now we have a couple more have sprung up over the years. But it's a really fun time. If you guys aren't doing anything at the end of July, you should come out to Silicon Valley. We partner with NASA Ames every year, and we host a big conference, and we focus on the commercialization of space. We also have a $100,000 business plan competition, which the prize has been growing every single year. This past year, we gave out like $175,000 in prizes, and it's been growing every year. We also have a policy, strategy, and action wing, which I'll talk about as well, and I've got a really cool video for you. And then we've got a monthly newsletter called NewSpace News, which if you go to spacefrontier.org, you can actually sign up for the monthly newsletter and stay involved with everything going on in the new space industry. So we are now going to try and show you another video here.
To make a difference
as far as the International Space Station and as close as the ALS patient next door.
When the students at West Shore Junior Senior High School entered the Teacher in Space Challenge to develop an experiment worthy of flying on the International Space Station, they knew that they wanted it to have something to do with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. Students had watched helplessly as their PE teacher and cross-country coach, Jason Ritworth, declined physically from ALS. The students created an experiment that models the enzyme reaction responsible for ALS patient paralysis in order to test the ability of an enzyme to function in microgravity. While researching ALS, the students were moved to expand their mission to include helping the ALS community right here, right now, by collecting supplies and funds, attending support group meetings, soliciting donations for items and equipment for patients, participating in fundraising events, and raising money through the sales of mission patches. It is their hope that this experiment will be one step in the process towards finding a viable cure for ALS while raising public awareness.
Why is it so important to bring space education into the classroom with today's economy? The positive effect that the ALS experiment has had on Jason's community is a prime example. Teachers in Space uses the excitement of low-gravity exploration in order to increase interest in the subject areas of science, technology, engineering, and math. Quality STEM education must include unforgettable experiences for the students and teachers beyond the classroom walls. One way to increase this interest is by sponsoring a student experiment on the International Space Station each year. But just like educating children or finding a cure for ALS, we can't do it alone. We need your help. To this point, the lifeblood of Teachers in Space has been funded through a NASA grant, support from companies, nonprofits, and donors just like you. Because of the current economic climate, we now need your help to continue these extraordinary opportunities. Teachers in Space is a national organization serving educators whose interests are literally out of this world. Thanks to you, the Rocket Hub community, and other national endeavors such as popular science, we can now increase national public awareness and support for programs such as Teachers in Space. This project would raise the $25,000 needed to fly a student experiment to the ISS in 2014. The 2013 mission experiment is researching ALS. What will American students choose in 2014?
And it'll be flying on a Dragon Falcon 9, and it'll be flying to the International Space Station.
Help us make a difference right now.
You can make a difference right now.
Right now. Right now.
Their teacher actually
Right now.
during the course of their school year, their teacher came down with ALS, and they got pretty passionate about finding a cure for it, and so they developed an experiment that went up to the International Space Station that provides some pretty vital research in order to do that. So that's pretty cool. Also, the very next one is the political wing that I'm going to talk to you about. We pride ourselves in being the nonsensical voice of the space program. We have a very sharp vision of what we want to see in space. We have a very sharp vision of what we're not doing now that we should be doing, and we like to call on Congress and NASA when we don't see things the way that we would like to see them. And this was something that developed a couple years back. It started a couple years back with Mr. Jeff Greason from X Square Aerospace. He was part of the Augustine Committee that was appointed by the president to review the human spaceflight program in general. And he was pretty angry coming out of that. He was not allowed to speak publicly for a while, but once the dust settled, he came to us, we went to him, and he gave an awesome speech at ISDC, which is the conference given by National Space Society every year. And he went to Huntsville, Alabama, and gave a speech in 2009, and he talked all about why sustainable settlement was not happening, and why do you go on NASA's website and never once do you see the word settlement? Why is that? Why, if we have a human spaceflight program, do we not talk about what the purpose is of human spaceflight? It's eventually to live there. We're learning all about how to live there. We have 7 astronauts on the International Space Station, well, 9 as of a couple days ago. I think it's back down to 7 now. But we're learning all this technology. Why not turn 7 into 700? So that's kind of where we go. And his speech was all about what we needed to do in order to correct our course of action. And it turned into a video. And that is what I'm about to show you now. Come on. All right, let's just do this. We call it There's Another Way.
It was an age that began with a bold declaration. It was an age that inspired generations, transformed culture, technology, and set up new industrial revolution. Now, flash forward to today. Some say our best days are over, and we can't do great things in space anymore.
Houston now controlling the flight of Atlantis. The space shuttle spreads its wings one final time for the start of a sentimental journey into history.
The U.S. scrapped its shuttle program and now wants the private sector to come up with ways to get astronauts to space.
For the first time in 50 years, America is not the leader in spaceflight.
After we stopped going to the moon, it all ended. We stopped dreaming.
But most people don't know that we're on the verge of the next great space age. Are you ready for what's next? We now have the ability to create a future where people live, work, and create in space. By applying common sense, basic business thinking, and living off the land, we will enter a new and exciting era of space exploration. And now we can do it for less than we are spending on our space program today. Let me show you an example of how this is possible. For the first 100 miles or so into space, commercial U.S. rocket companies carry astronauts and crew back and forth to wherever they need to go. This saves money and creates a new U.S. space transportation industry. We don't need new, expensive, single-purpose rockets. We just need more flights of smaller rockets that we already have. Commercial trucks, trains, and ships, just like a commercial rocket, are designed for the short haul. Bigger trips to space need more launches, not bigger launches. Just like on Earth, customers don't care how big and shiny your truck is as long as your cargo gets from point A to point B safely. They're happy, period. This saves the U.S. taxpayer money by lowering the cost from Earth to low Earth orbit by a factor of 5. Between Earth and the Moon is a stable point called L1, where the Earth's gravity and the Moon's gravity cancel out. Here is where we put a gas station and a research facility. This is where we continue to learn to live and work in space. Over time, L1 will grow and become one of our key hubs in space, where we will connect flights from Earth to the Moon, Mars, and asteroids. Now we can land on the Moon with reusable, multi-purpose commercial landers. First, robots land, then crews land, to begin harvesting lunar ice and making rocket fuel. Operated by people on Earth 24 hours a day, the Moon crew is there to keep the robots running and harvesting ice, turning it into rocket fuel. Using the landers now filled with propellant, our crews fly back to L1, filling the tanks with rocket fuel. Each flight from the Moon adds to the reserves, which results in lowering the amount of fuel we have to carry all the way from Earth. This makes each flight cheaper. The L1 station not only becomes a gas station in space, but also a research facility where we begin to learn how to keep crews healthy for longer and longer stays in space, which is something we'll need to know as we go further and further into space. Using spaceships that never return to Earth, astronaut crews travel back and forth between L1 and LEO, carrying fuel to grow our reserves at each location. Now this process allows us all to travel to and from other places around as well. For instance, asteroids. This allows NASA to gather critical scientific data and also scouts for other potential useful resources, such as rare earth metals like gold and platinum. Now in the 60s, each trip to the surface of the moon cost about $32 billion each on average, or the cost of 19 shuttle flights. Using this new system, a mission to the moon costs only $2.7 billion per year, or 1.7 shuttle flights. Here's another comparison. The cost of the entire shuttle program was $209 billion, and that only got us to lower Earth orbit. Using this new system, the cost of permanent lunar settlement, including initial propellant production, would cost $90 billion. That's less than half. At this point, we will have the skills and technologies for the trip everyone's been waiting for, Mars. But we're not directly going to the Martian surface. First, we do the same thing we did on the moon and at L1. We create an offshore gas station. We have capsules going back and forth between Mars, Moon, and L1. And telerobotic rovers making Martian rocket fuel. This means that we don't have to carry the fuel that's necessary for the return trip, or even for the rides down to the surface of Mars. All we need is enough fuel to get to the Martian moon. We'll collect whatever we need after we get there. From the Mars moon, astronauts are able to control robots on Mars. These robots explore, gather, and return samples, and prepare the right site for the first human landing. Now on Mars, the same thing is happening. Landers are going back and forth between the moon and the surface, and rovers are going back and forth between the Mars factory and Martian ice, thus making rocket fuel. Now, the first human landing on Mars can take place, with the habitat and fuel for their return trip already waiting for them. Supported by Mars Moon, and knowing safety is only a few miles overhead, our first humans can begin exploring Mars and telling us back on Earth what it's like. They can send back samples, conduct research, and build settlements. And this is all while making rocket fuel at the same time. So how much does this cost, and how long will it take? Well, with this plan, getting to Mars will cost $192 billion, and it'll take 20 to 25 years to finish, which averages about $12 billion a year. This is well under the current NASA budget, which is currently standing at $17 billion per year. Some of you may be thinking right now, why haven't we started this yet? Where are we now compared to this plan? Well, we're just now beginning this process with the emerging partnership between the commercial space industry and NASA, and we'll need to continue this trend if we're going to make this a reality. As President Kennedy said, we do these things not because they are easy. Well, you know the rest. We will only be able to do this if we change the way we think about what we want to do in space, and how we want to do it. To afford to explore, America can't do things the old way. It's a new age. If we put our heads together, new thinking and new space can lead to a new frontier. Now, let's go make it happen.
So, there was a lot of things said in that video that people took objection to in Washington, D.C. and elsewhere, especially within NASA headquarters. They said, look, we can't do it. And why promote space settlement if it's just infeasible? It costs too much money. We don't have the infrastructure. It's impossible. Maybe in the future sometime when we have a whole lot more money. It's not true. It's completely not true. What we did was we knew that when we put this video out publicly that there was going to be a lot of, hey, wait a minute, where's the numbers behind that? Where's all the research for that? And so what we did was we have facts that support every single piece talked about in that video. And this website here must have deleted it. This is our website. There it is. If you go onto our website, you can see this is the website that actually, here, let me do full screen here. You can see here's the background of the video and how we ended up doing it. This is the ISDC 2011 speech that Jeff Greason gave, and this talks about the conversation that we had. And then, this is the cool part, this is where we break down NASA's budget and we say this is what they're spending on currently and this is what we think they should spend on instead. This is what makes us angry. It's the fact that we can achieve something like this with the current NASA budget. It can even go down and still we can get to Mars sustainably with a settlement in L1, in LEO, on Mars, and on Mars moon. And it can all talk to each other within the same NASA budget that we have now. It's kind of hard to believe, right? Well, why aren't we doing that now? And that's what we try and promote. So this talks all about the breakdown of what was spent, what currently got spent, and what should be changed. This is the total NASA budget breakdown for fiscal year 2014. And in green here, this is this is the human spaceflight part, the exploration space operations currently. You can see here that we've got ISS, spaceflight services, research and development, and SLS and Orion, which these things cost a lot of money, and we think that that money would be better spent doing something else. Come on. No, it won't let me get out. Get me out of here. There we go. So where do we go from here? We have this cool video. Why isn't Congress talking about it? Well, they actually are. We met with the staffers for the Space Science Subcommittee, and we showed them this video, and we talked about it, and they said, oh, interesting. All right, well, there's these crazy space kids that think that they can redo NASA. All we have to do is give them $500 billion more than we spend on now. We said, no, look at the details. We spend exactly the same that we have now. We develop core technologies. We do milestones. We do stepping stones. And we do that. We also have this thing called a settlement enabling test, which basically any piece of policy relating to NASA and space, we can put through a litmus test, if you will. And it goes through core ideas. For instance, does it expand human access to the frontier? Is it sustainable? Does it have a settlement enabling strategy? What's the policy and legal regime behind this? Who makes the laws? Who makes the rules? Who makes the decisions within this? And also, what is the return on investment? And it's interesting when you apply this test to certain things like International Space Station, things like SLS and Orion, things like Constellation that just got canceled a couple of years back. And when you start applying these core principles to this legislation, things start coming out of that. You're just like, wait a minute, why is Constellation developing this whole new rocket program when we already have commercial providers that launch pretty similar size payloads? Why not develop that instead of this? And it starts making you think a little bit differently. And we met with them about a year ago, and we are continuing discussions today. So we also believe that nothing is sacred. And I know I've got about maybe 10 minutes, right? Cool. So I'm right on time. So nothing is sacred within Space Frontier Foundation. We look at ourselves all the time, and sometimes painfully, and we say, okay, well, are we achieving our vision? Are we doing what we need to do? Are we enabling space settlement, or are we hindering it? Things like the ISS are good because we're learning how to promote habitation in space, in zero gravity. But think about this. Why was International Space Station designed that requires 7 people full-time to keep it in orbit? Why not design that robotically to where all 7 people on the International Space Station could do science instead of keeping the thing alive? It's an interesting question. Why was International Space Station developed and built over so many years and not have the thought in mind of the end game? What's going to happen when the International Space Station is no longer paid for by NASA? Is it going to turn into another Mir space station? Are we going to deorbit it? Are we going to have it burn up on reentry, where things like the Kibo space laboratory that was built and put up there only a couple years ago is going to get deorbited in 2028? That doesn't really make sense, right? What if the International Space Station and future space stations were designed with the end game in mind of handing it off to the commercial sector? What if companies like Bigelow Aerospace could step in and say, hey, wait a minute, you've got this whole wing that, look, you've got a budget that you want to spend on other things. Totally cool. Why not have us, Mr. Bigelow Aerospace, why not rent out the space to us? Well, Bigelow looks at it currently at ISS and says, look, you know what? It requires 7 astronauts just to keep the thing in orbit. The upkeep is ridiculous. Why don't I just go off and design my own space station that requires little to no human interaction in order to survive? And that's what he's doing. So these are the kind of questions that we ask. So also, we have a communications team. If you want to get involved, these are the people to talk to. The whole reason why we are here is to let you guys know who we are, what we do, and how to be involved in it. If something, there's probably a couple of you in the crowd right now, which is like, yes, I want to be involved, I want to be part of this. This is who to talk to. You can be I'm looking at people in the room right now that are conference volunteers. We've got entrepreneurs that are working with the business plan competition that are volunteering for that. We've got volunteers that are working on our Teachers in Space program. We have people that do an annual blitz on the Hill in Congress and decide to do the policy wing. If you want to be part of things like the settlement enabling test or the video or something like that, come talk to me, and there's many ways to be involved. So that's all I got. So, any questions? Thank you.
Questions?
A big question that I get asked all the time is why, if regarding one of the videos I showed you, the There Is Another Way video, they said, why is it that all of this is possible within the same NASA budget, but it's not being done yet? There's a lot of smart people in Congress and within NASA headquarters. Why is that not happening? Something must be awry there. What's going on here? Why are we spending the current NASA budget and all we get out of it is the International Space Station, Huntsville, Alabama, developing a rocket engine that's not going to fly for 10 years, and possibly an Ares rocket coming in a couple of years? Why is it that that's our entire space program, including rovers and Mars and stuff? And the robotic part of it's totally separate. But why is it that our human space flight isn't doing what we're doing now? And the answer to that is that Congress is in charge of NASA's budget. There's a lot of smart people within NASA that want to do this. They dedicated their lives to getting humans onto Mars. And they have a whole lot of different ways that they think that they could do it. And to tell you the truth, this is not the way that we think should happen. This is just a proof that it can happen. We can get sustainable settlement. We can have humans living on Mars, on the moon, and everything else, and it's actually feasible. Yes?
Yeah, I have a question. If Capitol Hill never pulls through and never backs this with government funds or anything like what you're hoping to have happen and then to partner with it commercially, what is your contingency plan?
Well, about 10, 15 years ago, Congress laughed Space Frontier Foundation out the room when we said that there's going to be a future where commercial companies are going to launch astronauts into space. They said, nope, rockets, we know rockets, nobody else knows rockets like we know rockets. NASA is always going to build rockets, and they're launching astronauts into space is the job of government. And so we got to work. We started scratching our heads. We're like, wait a minute, that's not true. We can do this commercially for faster, better, and cheaper and still achieve the same safety. So we developed this thing called COTS, Commercial Orbital Transportation System, which then we helped develop it, actually, in DC. It was a consortium that actually developed it. And a lot of the people involved said, all right, well, we need to change the political spectrum to make it legal to launch things commercially and not be a subcontractor on cost-plus contracts with the government and with NASA. Because like companies like Boeing and Lockheed and everything like that, they subcontract to NASA. And so that's a huge victory for us. We developed COTS, which then turned into CCDev, which now turns into CCICAP, which now the government has made it legal to for companies like SpaceX to launch astronauts into space. And we never thought that was possible, but that's a huge victory for us. So things like this actually do happen. It takes time. It takes a lot of calling your Congress critters and banging on their door and making phone calls, because in the end, we vote them in. And we tell them what we want to see, and we make it happen. Got some questions over here. Okay, hang on.
Okay, hello. So it's all a great plan of getting to Mars and settlement on there, all for that. Have you thought about, though, the radiation levels that you're going to get in space? Do you have a plan to protect people against the radiation levels?
Absolutely. We don't have a plan. There's a lot smarter people that deal with that kind of stuff than Space Frontier Foundation does. Their radiation is just like all the other things that it's an issue. Is it a brick wall or is it a speed bump? We don't really know. To tell you the truth, we don't even know what radiation actually does to the body. We just know it's bad. We don't really know the science, the technology. What we need to do is we need to do a whole lot more research and figure it out. Now, is human ingenuity smart enough to find a solution to space radiation? I think so. Is it going to take time and a lot of money and a lot of research and a partnership between the government and the commercial industry? Probably. But is it possible? I'd say yes. Is it possible faster than what we're doing now? I'd say yes to that too. More questions?
First off, thank you for what you do and your foundation. I believe there should always be more advocacy on Congress for manned space exploration. But my question is, are you familiar with Robert Zubrin's Mars Direct plan, and why not advocate for a simpler plan that can get us to Mars sooner and utilize existing technologies or something that's nearer on the horizon like SLS or the Falcon 9 Heavy?
Yep. The important thing to note and the important takeaway here from the There Is Another Way video is that it is a possible solution, not the solution that Foundation believes in. Robert Zubrin's plan, he has spent a lot of time and writing books about it and everything like that, and we continue to talk to him, and he gives presentations at our conferences and all that, and it is a definitely feasible option. Another feasible option is Mr. Buzz Aldrin and the Aldrin Cycler. And it's an interesting idea to take a cruise ship to Mars instead of taking a capsule to Mars. So there's a lot of issues out there, but there's a lot of issues and there's a lot of solutions out there. The important thing is that the conversations are happening now, whereas previously we weren't even invited to the conversation. Yep.
Hi, Alex from the UCSD SEDS chapter.
All right.
So my question is, besides things like space hotels or just experiencing zero gravity, what are the actual human benefits that could come out of commercialization in space?
I get asked that question a lot. And I'm going to answer your question with another question. What if life in space was exactly like life here on Earth? It's an extension. What happens, like yesterday we heard a presentation from Phil Plait about what happens when Earth gets hit by a giant asteroid. What happens to life on Earth? Why not have humanity expand into space, onto other worlds, and have life in space just like here on Earth? Yeah, gravity might be a little different. We might need to alter some things. We might need to look up at a black sky instead of a blue sky. We might be able to see the Earth instead of the moon in the sky. Life is going to be different, but it can also be pretty similar. And I think that it's fun to think about. And when you start thinking about that, your other question gets answered, which is what are the benefits? The sky's the limit when you're thinking about it. There's a whole bunch of benefits. Yeah.
I am very familiar with Burt Rutan's Spaceship One and Virgin Galactic.
Yeah.
Is there a way that instead of building satellites that we can build, like revise the space shuttle and use technology that we kind of are developing right now, like the space solar sail, the feathering system for returning down to Earth, and like there's plasma engines and ion engines, things like that. Is there any way that we can use that instead of just using satellites?
There's so if I can understand your question is why not use existing technology instead of developing new technology, right? First of all, thank you for asking that question. It seems like there's a lot of people in Congress that don't understand the fact that we've built rockets for the last 50 years. Why do we need to continue to build new expensive rockets when we already have rockets?
And also, sorry for interrupting,
it's all good.
But it has also been proven that solid disks have also been aerodynamically sufficient over the last few years.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that's the longer conversation to have other than just a simple question. So I'd be happy to continue that elsewhere. Well, I think it's lunchtime. I don't know about you guys, but I'm hungry. So maybe we can call this a day.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, guys.